Neutral is a place of no movement. It means you're not making progress towards the goals or the ideas that are really important to you. Welcome to Beyond Neutral, where we talk about what gets you stuck and how we can shift and navigate the road forward. As leaders, as professionals in our careers, or just balancing and creating the kind of life you desire. I'm your host, Paula Reed. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to today's episode of Beyond Neutral. So I hope that you caught last week's episode. I talked with Mike Rataczak about career change and what it takes to really do that. So if you didn't listen to that episode, it's phenomenal if that's something that you're thinking about and having a challenge with. Mike had been a head of human resources in the fashion industry for a number of years. And I knew him in that capacity and had worked closely with him in that capacity. And he made a giant shift and left the corporate world and started his own interior design firm very successfully. But he talked about the challenge in making that kind of a change in your life and how you get stuck and where you get stuck. And career change is something that I talk with a lot of clients about. So it's a phenomenal episode to listen to and get insight from somebody who's gone through that. As is typical when I'm taping an episode, we do a little prep and we then go through the episode. And then I turn off the record and then we kind of talk about how it went. And in this case, in this episode, when we finished taping and we started talking about our conversation, he said to me, Paula, the one thing I wished that I had touched on, and it was actually something I had tried to get him to touch on and it got lost in a different direction, was that the biggest challenge is the voice inside your head that stops you from going forward, that holds you back, that are the things that you've used to really define, your belief system, your value system, your expectations, and how the biggest challenge that he faced was changing that voice and listening in a different way or overcoming that fear. And so we ended up in our conversation, I ended up saying, let me record this. And I clicked the tape back on and we had another little discussion about that I'd like to share with you and then come back. So this is a snippet that came at the end of our conversation about the voice inside of all of our heads that can be a real challenge if we're trying to change or trying to transform. So let's have a listen. Mike, I know from dealing with, a lot of people that one of the biggest challenges as we try to transition, we try to do something new, is we have this voice in our head that stops us, tells us stories, does things like right. Emotions that hold on to us. How did you experience that?
I would say it was the defining characteristic of my life. So the voice inside my head, I think, these voices I think are established when we're children, right? They're
Yep.
learned as children about who we are, what we need to do, what's right, what's wrong, coming from a variety of sources. And they become the influences, a primary influence in our adult lives. And the voice in my head as an adult was, you are supposed to work a 9-to-5 job, white collar job, you move up the corporate ladder, you save your money, you achieve the next level of success, very much follow this specific routine.
You have the title, different title every time,
title,
right?
That's right.
The title. Yeah.
Moving up, if you move laterally, it's because it's going to get you up. And that is, Mike Rataczak, that is the only right path for you. You are not an artist. You are not a designer. You are supposed to be the best little boy in the world doing these things.
The corporate job.
As to my parents, they were very supportive of this career change. They sent me a dozen roses my last day of work.
Oh, that's interesting.
Started the design business. So I am not attributing this to my dad, okay? I want to be really clear. But that voice held me in its grip for most of my adult life.
Sure.
Like I said, I had a good life. I had a lovely life, but that voice held me back for a long time. And moving away, wrestling that voice down and recognizing that it did not speak truthfully about me was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Making this career change, as you said, transformation, and I like that word a lot, is daunting enough as it is.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Sure.
And the hardest thing I have ever done in my life was wrestling with that voice these last several years and learning to see it for what it was and learning to put it in perspective so that I could hear my own voice more. And it is really, really hard. And even now, 5 years into this change, this transformation, that voice is still there. I've managed to knock it down a lot. I've managed to put it in perspective and see it for what it is, but I still grapple with it. And I think for listeners who are considering big transformation in your lives, you're not alone. This is normal. I think most of us have this, that remember that voice isn't necessarily who you are. It's a comfortable script. It's a comfortable pattern. Even if it doesn't suit you, it's what you know.
What you know.
Putting it in perspective, putting it somewhat to rest is daunting work.
It is daunting work. I call that, I had asked you earlier about the assumptions that you had. And that voice is all about our assumptions, right? What we assume we're supposed to be, how we assume we're supposed to behave, what we assume our career progression or our life progression or whatever it is. And it's really hard to break those patterns because they've been embedded with us and they've served us well along the way. To your point, they served you well along the way.
It worked well. It did.
But then as we grow and we get older, we realize that, it's really the internal inputs that start to matter more than those external inputs, which is where a lot of those assumptions come from. Our parents, our families, our communities growing up. And we start moving from those external voices to the internal voices, and really paying attention to these is what's hard. And that's really where the work is in trying to transition and trying to transform.
Exactly right.
Thank you for sharing that.
I learned that, my needs, my fundamental core needs were changing, and that inner voice was not.
Right. So, but you found a way to change the inner voice.
Yeah. And it was a long, arduous struggle. It's hard work.
It's hard work.
It's worth it though in the end, but it is hard work, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means acknowledge up front that it's going to be hard work and get help from others to help you get through it.
100%. And the hard work is that we've lived with those things for so long and they've protected us for so long and guided us for so long that they keep pulling us back. Those emotions keep pulling us back to, what's safe? Yeah. And it's getting the courage to do what is really driving you here as opposed to what's safe on the outside. So thank you for that insight. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I hope you found that interesting or insightful. I really appreciated that aspect of my conversation with Mike, and I think it's really important. It's a lot of what I've been talking about this season around the things that get us stuck, the things that come up, a lot of them emotion driven or expectation driven or value driven, right? Or assumptions that we have about ourselves, and how those things can serve to really hold us in place instead of helping move us forward, and how very difficult it is to really turn that voice off or lessen its impact that it's having on us. And you could hear from Mike's discussion about that was the biggest challenge he had. And I find that's the biggest challenge many of my clients have. And whether that be transitioning into a new kind of role and realizing that you have to use a different set of measure, a different set of expectations, or adjust the way you think of yourself or the way that other people see you, or whether that's making a really significant change or going through a significant change, a tremendous career shift, a change in your marital status, a change in your decision to have children. I mean, I can tell you that voice inside my head when I went through my divorce, man, that voice was unbelievably powerful. And it took me so long to shift what that voice was trying to tell me. So it's really about the exercise of kind of going through what it means to really transform ourselves, right? It follows a very predictable pattern in a lot of ways. what it takes to do that. And it starts with really reexamining and understanding what our beliefs are, what our values are, what our assumptions are about ourselves, what our assumptions are about success, what our assumptions are about our value, about our happiness, and really reexamining them and then reframing the emotion around it. I've talked a lot about how those emotions that come up as you try to make change pulls us back. And that's a lot of what Mike's talking about, that emotion of fear. And then, revitalizing or creating new belief systems or new value experiences for ourselves or value propositions of what that means, and disengaging from the ones that we held that are really no longer serving us. In Mike's case, it no longer served him to believe that success was a corporate role. He needed to reshift that assumption that he had. And it's that assumption that's basically embedded in our brains from childhood. It's usually things that have been external to us. And as we grow and as we evolve, or as we go through significant challenges in our lives, our internal systems start becoming more important, and our self-concept changes from what our internal drivers are. Rather, it changes to what our real internal drivers are and away from what some of those external drivers are. So I thought that was a really important snippet, as did Mike, and he was excited to be able to add that into our discussion. But it's an important snippet as you're trying to transform yourself, wherever that is, however that is. And we all go through different moments of transformation in our lives. The voice inside your head can be the most difficult part of that transformation process. So understanding the steps you need to go through in order to facilitate a change around that, that's where the work is. That's where the hardest work is. So thank you again to Mike Rataczak for his honesty and his vulnerability and being incredibly forthcoming in both of these episodes. So if you missed the one before this, please listen to it. It was a great discussion, and he's a wonderful friend and a colleague that I had the pleasure of working with professionally for a number of years, and now may need to have to hire him to take a look at my interior space. So that's the discussion today from Beyond Neutral. I hope you're having a great day. Keep driving and think about what's getting you stuck. What do you need to rethink? And if you want to talk about it, reach out. Happy to do so. Take care. Thanks so much for joining us on this week's episode of Beyond Neutral. Make sure to visit our website, www.readandco.com, for this week's show notes. That's reidnco.com. And if you found value in today's episode, I would really appreciate you giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All of this helps to support the show. Thanks so much. Take care.